Welcome to the Real Estate Strategies Podcast with Danille.
Hello.
And Ken. How are you guys today? So today we're going to talk about 6 habits that keep people broke. And we like this topic because Danille and I have been talking about this over the last couple of days. So let's start with the 6 habits. The first one, of course, it's not keeping track of your finances, right?
Yeah, it's super important, to keep track of where your money's going. Because if you don't know where your money's going, as we always say, then it's just not going to go to anywhere fruitful.
I know. Well, I remember as a kid, I used to have to keep receipts or whatever, but write this down. But today there's like all these great apps.
Yeah, I know Mint's one of the apps. As you guys, most of you know, I use my little phone notepad, which is super old school. But, other people, I have friends that they simply put money in envelopes for the week, spending money in envelopes, and that works for them. That's a little non-digital, but sometimes, holding that actual cash in their hand makes them so they don't have to keep track of anything other than that's how much they can spend.
That's true. Well, I know Danille really, really follows this one completely because one time we went to the post office and bought one stamp and she put it into her expense.
Every dollar. Every dollar.
Anyway, that was a stamp.
Or the time that you told me I needed new shoes and I said I got to wait 20 more days.
I know.
Because I ain't got all money.
Walking around, I'm like, you look homeless. Yeah, it's like I need 20 days before I could buy some new shoes.
I think you just bought me a pair.
I had to. You should have seen them. So anyway, the point is, we weren't always this diligent.
No.
And I think that's important. It's something that you have to learn. And when you start to keep track of finances, you actually start to see some of your spending habits. They start to show up. And also, another way to do it, although this isn't the greatest way, is to put everything on a credit card, but pay it off every month, but at least you see it, right? At least you're looking at your statement and you're seeing, oh gosh, I spent $50 on coffee in the mornings the last month. Maybe I can get that down. So you need to have it so that it's trackable.
I think too, the budget portion is so important because you might not care that you spent $50 on coffee, but say you have, I don't know, $500 for the month to spend. And then you are buying that coffee every day and you're saying, oh, wow, this is really dipping into this $500 I have every time I get coffee. So it's those things that, are pointed out to you as you start to run out of money, or maybe the first month you do it, you run out of money at week 2 for spending. Then you start to say, okay, for next month, where can I cut? Because I needed to make this last 4 weeks and it only lasted 2.
Yeah, there's a number of small adjustments you can make, but it's really hard to make them unless you actually know where you're spending your money today. And that's why it just needs to be trackable.
Absolutely. And then the second habit that is really important is not having a strong network.
Yeah, that's for sure. Why don't you go into that a little bit more?
So I like that one. So, you always hear, and we talk about on this channel, is you are the equivalent of the 5 people you hang out with or, whatever, right? And it is really true, but I think that there's more to it than you picking up habits from those people if they're not motivated people. It's also that you're really limiting your network.
I would agree with this. I think what this was for me was, I remember when I got my first job, I didn't even really know how to use an organizer for my day, right? I remember we had way back, this is dating myself, I'm trying to remember the name of but there was an actual, like a book with a calendar in it, and you write them all down. This was old school, obviously, but it was so foreign to me. I'd never been taught, scheduling, organization, that kind of stuff. And what I found is that, the network of people that I was around was already doing it. So I was able to ask them. They were kind of mentoring me. This is how I do it. And this is, I think, what we're talking about. We're talking about people that are fine-tuning their time as far as from an efficiency standpoint, both from a budgeting standpoint and from an organization standpoint, because you guys will soon find out that your network will be your net worth, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, when you start to get a little bit older and you look at people that hang around people, it's like you don't really see people that are, like, for example, so say you want to, everyone's always like, how do I raise money, right? How do I find investors? Well, if all your friends play video games all day, every day, and they go work, low-paying salary jobs, you're probably not going to find investors through them, you know?
That's a good point.
But if you're, if you're friends with people that are doing stuff and starting businesses, and they don't even have to be wealthy, they just have to be doing things. And then all of a sudden you want to raise money, they'll know people that are doing other people that are doing things, or somebody themselves, like, oh, I know a guy doing a deal here. I know a guy that has a business here. So that's what it is. That's your network. And if you want to stay just with people that are just doing all the things that you're doing right now, if those things aren't very productive, you're never going to have a strong network. And the network you have makes a bigger difference than anything else you can do.
I know. I always tell everybody, environment is stronger than will. And I know, like if at the end of a day, I know people that go to the gym. I know people that go to the bar. You plug into other people's habits a lot of times. And so some of it is just being aware of those kinds of things and making better choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually the third one is habits. So the third thing that's holding you back is your habits, right? And your habits are keeping you broke. And I think one of the bigger habits I've seen a lot lately is video games.
Oh, I know. It's gotten a hold of my own kids.
Yeah.
It's gotten a hold of my friends' kids. I know a lot of people, even that work for us, go home and they do it. I don't know how true this is, but I've even seen something online that the quarterback for our Arizona Cardinals, they have him tracking, when I think it's Call of Duty. Is it Call of Duty or no? Grand Theft Auto. When Grand Theft Auto comes out, it actually shows up in his statistics when he actually plays football. So
like his stats go down.
Yeah, his stats go down. So I think it's a big deal, but it's not just video games. There's so many poor habits.
Well, I think, video games is predominantly boys, but I think girls are on just social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is.
Yeah, what's up with that? Why? What's up with all the selfie stuff?
It does suck you in though. I've even had friends that are in my group or very productive people say, I had to take that off my phone because I would just get sucked in. You think you're going to be on it for 10 minutes and you're on it for an hour.
Yeah. I mean, but there's also habits around health and habits around sleeping and habits around eating and habits around drinking and habits around going to the gym and habits, around, as you said, social media. And, all of those things you need to take a look at and really understand. Where can you get your time back?
Yeah, and I like what Ed Milet said, it's not motivation because motivation comes and it goes. It's really just discipline, So you really need to be disciplined around your habits, and that's what's going to make you successful.
Yeah. The other thing that I found, there is a link to poor habits and depression.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think people need to understand. I've seen this firsthand. I've seen people that have poor habits, whether it's the way they eat or the way they don't sleep or they do sleep, let's say, or how long they sleep in, I should say, and their actual mental depression. And the minute that they change some of those things, that seems to lift. The fog lifts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to be a school teacher and we'd have summers off. And the first summer I didn't work and I got depressed after 2 or 3 weeks of not working. And I think for me what it was is, and I'm not a person that really gets depressed, but what it was is I wasn't doing anything and it gave me too much time to just think about things.
Yeah.
It's good. Not that it's just good to stay busy, but it was depressing to me because I really had nothing going on and nothing to do with my day.
We don't want you in that state for sure.
Yes, I was not pleasant around there. Well, I actually had to go get a job, really. I mean, I needed to work anyways because I was a teacher, but I also really just needed to get a job to just have something to do.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. So the fourth thing is, and this is something that I just have learned through hanging out with people that I've been hanging out with the last few years, is not being financially literate. So I think that's just something that the average person does not think about, but it is one of the biggest things that if you're broke, you need to understand.
Yeah, it's not taught in schools, and I believe that's actually by design. And there's a couple things that you can do really easily. I obviously am a huge proponent of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a story. It's a really easy read. You can read it in one evening. It's a book about accounting. It's simple. And then the next piece, the next tool for education is the cash flow game. And if you could just look at those two things, you'll learn, what an asset and a liability and what a cash flow statement is and some very basic things, because the cash flow game, when you're playing a game. So it is a great way. I taught my kids that way. And I remember when they were young, my son was in a junior high and he's like, Dad, we're learning accounting. And he goes, I'm the only one in the class that understands. And it was just because we'd been playing that game, cash flow. And it sounds simple and it sounds easy, and it is. It's just a matter of understanding what some of those things are. The other thing that I don't think I fully understood as a young man was how inflation can impact and erode, erode your savings, right? Mm-hmm. And you remember I grew up, in the 80s, and the inflation and interest rates were high. And I didn't quite understand it. I was making money, I was working hard, but it was buying me less. And so there's just a few little concepts I think that people can understand.
It's by design. We don't understand finance, and essentially they encourage it. They encourage debt and school loans, and then, with the colleges. And then the colleges allow all these credit card companies to just, flood, the college kids. And truthfully, when you're under all of that debt, it's really hard to get out of, and it's hard to not be broke when you have so much debt. And that is step one of, Dave Ramsey talks about the debt snowball, and that's where he does have it right, is you got to get out from under that debt. And if you're young enough, you don't never get in that debt. But, our system, they want you guys indebted because you're much easier to control that way.
Yeah. Guys, this is not a conspiracy either.
No.
We have friends that went through medical school. They have hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt racking up each and every month with a fairly high interest. And they can't buy a house.
Right.
It's ridiculous. They're renting. They're doctors. And, it's just not good. So, there is something to that. And I remember when I was in college, I remember going down to the mailboxes in my dorm, and they would be flooded with credit card statements, trying to get these young kids in debt before they got jobs. And, of course, they also push that you have to have a credit card to build your credit. So you just got to be really careful.
The fifth thing is living on one source of income.
Yeah.
So many people do this.
Yeah.
Less people now because they're starting to have to make more money because of inflation. But
I realize there's all kinds of articles on this. It says that the average millionaire has 7 streams of income. Now, that might be hard to believe if you have one. But I will tell you that I have, over 10 easily. And there's just things that I started and did. Not all, some of them don't make a ton of money. Some of them make a lot. I do have my primary way that I make money at MC companies, of course. But most people I know have money coming in from a lot of different sources, including yourself.
Yeah. I have 4 or 5 myself. And I think it's important because, one, it's a backup, right? It's a fail safe if you get fired from your job or whatever, life happens, But the other thing is it's extra money coming in. Most people that are wealthy don't just make one, money off of one source of that income. They have multiple things coming in that build themselves to be wealthy, right? Between all of the different streams. So I think that it's important that you start to branch out and try to find something that interests you. And not really just like a second job. I don't have a second job. I just have different sources of income that I do and enjoy doing that bring in income. So I think, and some of them are very passive and some of them are not. But either way, I do enjoy all of them. And it's not taking a secondary position.
Yeah. The other thing I think you should also point out to people that you started off as a school teacher.
Right.
And you were under 40 grand a year, right?
30. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been there, both of us. And the other thing is I think that had you not had summers off, you may never have fallen out of that trap. But what you did was you started working in the summers, and then that turned into your first business.
It did over time. Yeah. I think that if I wouldn't have got, I would argue with you on the summers off, but if I wouldn't have got paid so little, I think that I would have probably stayed there forever, right? Because I was just making so little money. I was kind of drowning, which forced me to move back home and, have to reevaluate my whole life. But I think if I would have been making, 60, 70 grand a year, I probably would have just stayed. And the problem with that, because I know a lot of you are in that situation, is it's comfortable, or maybe you make a lot of money and you just hate your job, but it's comfortable, but it's not doing what you actually want to do.
Right. And I think that's the important thing is if you have other streams of income coming in, then it actually empowers you a little bit to kind of evaluate what it is you want to do.
Well, and it does, right? Because you can't just quit your job. Like, I hear people all the time, I'm going to quit my job and start a company. It's like, no, you're not, because your company is not going to make any money for 1 to 3 years probably. So, there's a slow transition. And you're not going to know if you like what you're doing at this new company and if it's a good idea and if it's going to work until you start it outside of the business hours, right? But it kind of comes full circle, because that means you can't be playing video games and you can't be on social media and you have to have good habits in order to have time to do any of this stuff if you're already working 40 hours a week.
Right. Yep. Good point.
Yeah. So I think that's just really important. And then this last one kind of encompasses a lot of things. And, when we were talking about what to put on here, we were like, this one kind of came to mind last, but your risk tolerance is also keeping you poor.
That's a good point. Yeah. So why don't you explain that a little bit, because we were debating on this.
Yeah. So basically, and I know a lot of people that do this, you kind of, you're living in fear. Like you hate your job, but it pays the bills, or, you want to make more money and try a business, but you're worried about what other people are going to think about it. Or, you could take out that loan to do X, Y, or Z, but, it's a lot of money and you're not sure. And the truth is that if you don't take some risk for what you want, you're always going to be in the same place,
Well, I hear this all the time. I see it especially at my age, where people have had long careers and they've been in corporate America typically, or even if they've owned their own business, they just wish that they would have tried something different. And almost 100% of the time, I also hear the story where I left corporate America and I went out on started my own thing, and I was scared and I didn't think it would work out, but it has. It's the best decision I ever made. I've also heard that a lot.
Yeah, I think everything's a risk, right? Like me moving from Ohio to Arizona was a risk. Me quitting being a teacher was a risk. Me starting my own business was a risk. Like there's a lot of risks, and they don't all go well. Like you always hear about the risks that go well because you're like, oh, I should have done that. There's so many risks that go sideways, don't go well. But it doesn't mean that you failed. You just then have to try again until you find something that works. And, I like that quote that, you're never standing still in life. You're either falling behind or moving forward. So, if you're not taking risk and propelling yourself forward, then you are just falling behind.
Yeah, things are changing. And, especially with now AI and all this stuff, there's also tremendous opportunities as well, presenting themselves each and every day. But you're right. You have to be a little bit of a risk taker. And I actually think the opposite of what most people think. I think when people are getting a paycheck, go to school, get a good job, work really hard, that doesn't work.
Right.
But I do think that if you have one paycheck, one employer, one consultant job, whatever it is, I think that's when you're most at risk, because you don't always know what's going on with that employer. You don't always know what's going on with that one contract that you might get. I remember even when I first started my own business, I poured myself into one client. Mm-hmm. And, in the first 2 or 3 years, and it was awesome. They had a lot of, we had a lot of success with them. But then they came to me one day and said, I want to buy your company. And I go, no, I'm not going to sell my company. And guess what they did? They gave us 30-day notice, and they started a company, and they took the accounts with them and some of my employees. So it can happen. And my mistake was that I had almost 40% of my income in one client. So it can happen. It can happen with an employer. It can happen if you start your own business. But I think diversification is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of not caring what other people think and just, living your life for yourself and trying it.
Yeah, I think you'll find that most people are very resilient. Most people are pretty smart, and especially if you have a little bit of pressure, it actually becomes fun. And there's a lot of people that are doing it, so just jump out there and try it.
Yeah, and going back to that network piece, as you start to take these risks and try to do your own thing or whatever that risk is, you just naturally draw people that are doing the same thing, and you create like your own network. Because when somebody asks you at a bar right now, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm an accountant. They're like, okay. But when you say, well, I just started this accounting firm on the side and I'm an accountant, they say, oh, that's awesome. I have this thing, or I've done this. So you just open up, it's kind of like that thing where you don't notice your car driving by all the time until you buy your car, and then you keep seeing it everywhere. So the same thing, when you become an entrepreneur or you start following your dreams in any capacity, you have exciting things to talk about, and then you just naturally attract those kind of people and you start running into them everywhere.
Yep, it's you're vibrating at a different spot, and you start to talk about it, and people all of a sudden they start referring you business and opening doors for you, as opposed to I'm an accountant at a big firm.
Right.
It's very different. If you say I have my own business, then it's just like a realtor. I'm a realtor. Oh, I know somebody. Do you only want to buy a house? It's the same. It's a little bit of hustle, but it's really just a different conversation.
Absolutely. So we hope that helps you guys out there that are either wanting to make more money or you feel like you're broke and you want to make some money. These really are good pieces of advice. So I hope you take them with you and have a good week.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.